Hi, I'm Timothy. Today, we're looking at Karens who lost their lives in car accidents, leaving you to wonder, was the danger the road or them? From a Karen crashing out over missing sauce packets in a drive-thru, to a Karen who tried outrunning a police stop on the freeway only to meet the barrier in the worst way possible. It was August 2016 on a suburban arterial road on the west side of Ohio. The kind of stretch that stitches commercial lots together, gas stations, fast food signs, parking lots sharing curb cuts. It was mid-afternoon, the sun still high, visibility clear in every direction. Colleen Deering was 34 years old. She worked in a supervisory role at an office, the kind of position that puts you in the habit of managing outcomes and making sure things go the way you've decided they should. By the accounts of people who knew her, she carried that instinct everywhere. She was described as direct, easily agitated when challenged, and someone who genuinely could not let a conflict go once she had decided she was in the right. The people closest to her knew that about her. Colleen had already spent longer than she expected trying to get through the area. Traffic is heavier than usual, every turn taking just a little more time than it should have. By the time she pulled into the lot, her patience was already wearing thin. As she entered the lot, she spotted an open space ahead. Another car was already positioned for it, signal on, waiting, but she was approaching from the opposite direction. For a split second, it looked like she could take it first. She didn't slow down. Colleen turned her back on them mid-sentence and walked toward the store entrance, as if the conversation was already over because she had decided it was. The other driver followed briefly, still trying to reason with her. Colleen turned around, stepped toward them, and the confrontation escalated from there. Eventually, the other driver gave up, went back to their car, and started to leave. That should have been the end of it. But Colleen is not the type of person who would let things go easily. I'd be annoyed too if someone took my spot. But getting out and confronting them just feels like taking it too far. That response of the other driver seemed to make things worse. She left the store entrance, got back in her car, and followed them. She stayed close behind them, leaning on the horn, brake checking repeatedly to force a reaction. The other driver wasn't engaging. They were trying to put distance between the two vehicles, and still, she closed the gap every time they tried to create one. The other driver called police from their car. A cruiser located both vehicles within minutes and activated its lights. If I were in her situation, I'd stop the moment I saw the police car. No hesitation at all. She pushed past 60 miles per hour in a zone posted for 40, threading through gaps between cars that had shifted aside. Drivers around her were reacting, moving over, slowing down, and she was reading that as open road rather than what it actually was. At an intersection ahead, the light was red. She ran it anyway. Suddenly, a truck entered that intersection on a green signal. It struck the driver's side of her vehicle with enough force that the door caved inward immediately. Underneath, the collision damaged the fuel line, and leaking fuel reached hot components shortly after. Fire started at the undercarriage, moved into the footwell, and spread through the cabin. The door frame had warped from the impact and would not open. She was still restrained inside as smoke filled the car around her. Emergency crews arrived within minutes of the call. By the time the fire was suppressed, Colleen was found unresponsive in the driver's seat. The truck driver was uninjured and remained at the scene. The official cause of death was burns and smoke inhalation. Investigators found no fault with the truck driver. The signal had been green when he entered. If you think running a red light at 60 was reckless, this next one didn't happen on a highway. It happened in a drive-thru over something as small as missing sauce. It was July 20th, 2018, and a small fast food drive-thru lane in Arizona was running at full lunch traffic. The lane was narrow, the kind built tight between a curb and a row of concrete bollards meant to protect the building and menu board. Cars were stacked back nearly to the entrance, engines idling in the heat. Nothing about the setting hinted at what was coming. It was just a normal lunch rush in a normal parking lot. Michaela Doyle was 37, a part-time office worker who had spent over a year posting confrontation videos online, especially ones where she stood her ground in public. The week leading up to that day had been rough. She lost a side gig, her latest video underperformed, and she'd been saying she needed a post that would hit. She didn't pull into that drive-thru as a neutral customer. She came in already looking for something to film. She had also skipped lunch that day. Co-workers said she had been short with people all morning. By the time she reached the pickup window, she was hot, hungry, behind on content, and primed to treat any small problem as the problem of the day. I've had days where skipping a meal made me snap at people over tiny things. Thinking about Michaela, I can't really blame her. When she checked her bag and saw the sauce packets were missing, that small problem became the opening she had been waiting for. Instead of pulling forward like the employee asked, she stayed at the window. She rolled down her window, opened her door partway, propped her phone up and started recording. Cars behind her began to stack. People honked. She didn't move. Witnesses behind her in line confirmed she was leaning out of her door, half turned in her seat, filming back toward the cashier and gesturing at the cars behind her. Her SUV was in drive. Her foot wasn't firmly on the brake. The vehicle started to creep forward under idle. A driver several cars back, frustrated with the weight, tried to squeeze past on the left, hugging the curb tightly to get around. As they passed, their vehicle caught the outer edge of her open driver's side door. The door swung hard on its hinges. Michaela was partly outside the vehicle with her torso and leg between the door and the frame. The force pulled her off balance in a single, sudden motion. Her SUV kept rolling. With nothing holding the brake, it carried her forward into the concrete bollard beside the menu board. She was pinned between the swinging door and the post, with the engine still idling and the vehicle still pushing forward against the fixed structure. Bystanders ran over immediately. People shouted, called emergency services, and tried to reach her, but the SUV was still applying steady pressure against the bollard. One person managed to get inside and shift the vehicle into park, which finally stopped the forward push. First responders arrived within minutes. She was found unresponsive, pinned at torso and hip level against the post, with her phone still recording in the footwell. The official findings listed the cause of death as crush injuries from sustained compression between the vehicle door and the fixed concrete bollard. No charges were filed against the driver who tried to pass. The lane was reopened the next day. Lesson learned: don't let frustration turn a minor inconvenience into a dangerous situation. That should have been the kind of mistake that ends right there. But this next one didn't stop, didn't cool off, and didn't slow down until it was already too late. It was March 2017 on a two-lane rural highway cutting through central Georgia, the kind of road that opens wide between small towns, long flat stretches interrupted by tree lines and curves that don't always announce themselves before you're already in them. The weather was clear that day, visibility good in both directions, the kind of driving conditions where nothing external was working against you. Marla Taft was 41, and she had already been driving for hours that day. Her delivery route had run behind schedule that morning. Roads were her workplace, and somewhere along the way, that familiarity had hardened into a sense that she had more right to them than anyone else. People who knew her described someone who was quick to act and even quicker to take offense. The kind of person who had strong opinions about how other people drove and never once kept those opinions to herself. An SUV ahead of her moved into her lane to get around a slower vehicle. Nothing aggressive about the maneuver. The driver just found a gap and took it. Marla hit the horn within seconds. She even held it down. Then she swerved into the wrong lane to drive right next to the SUV. She matched their speed and held her position alongside them, window already down, waiting for the other driver to turn and look at her. Not to resolve anything. She wanted them to face her, to be acknowledged as someone they had wronged. I actually had something similar happen to me last year. I wasn't even trying to cut anyone off, but the guy next to me sped up just to glare at me. It's wild how fast people turn a normal lane change into a personal battle. The SUV eventually slowed to let her back in. That should have satisfied her, but instead she pulled directly in behind them. When a clear stretch of road opened ahead, she accelerated hard. Curve warning signs appeared along the right shoulder, the advisory speed marked at 35 miles per hour for the bend ahead. She didn't lift off the accelerator. She entered the bend at approximately 75 miles per hour. The rear of her vehicle broke loose first. She overcorrected, a sharp steering input that swung the car hard across the center line and off the pavement entirely. The vehicle hit a tree at the edge of the tree line head-on. The front end compressed inward, roughly 2 feet on contact. The steering column was driven rearward into her chest. Her lower body was pinned beneath the collapsed dashboard. Bystanders on the road called emergency services. When responders arrived, the car was non-drivable and Marla was unresponsive inside. Extrication was required before she could be reached. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The official cause of death was blunt force trauma. The SUV driver had pulled over and remained at the scene. Investigators confirmed through tire marks, vehicle trajectory, and the complete absence of braking before the curve that no contact had ever occurred between the two vehicles. The crash was caused entirely by her speed and loss of control. The final report cited aggressive pursuit as the contributing behavior. Most fights end when one person backs down. This one didn't, because backing down wasn't what she wanted. I think she wanted the other driver to feel afraid of her, and when they didn't show it, she kept pushing right into a sharp turn that she never made it out of. The next person I'm about to tell you about hadn't even reached her final confrontation yet when the damage had already started to build. It was November 2015 at a busy urban intersection in Texas, the kind of crossing that anchors a commercial district. Four-way signals, utility poles set close to the curb, and pavement that had been wet from earlier rain and hadn't fully dried by the time afternoon traffic picked up. Everything at that intersection was functioning the way it was supposed to. Gina Pratt was 38 years old. She worked in retail management, the kind of role that keeps you in charge of a floor, a team, and a set of expectations you set yourself. Her friend said she liked being in charge, but she got really upset if people didn't listen to her right away. She was known for arguing loudly in public over things most people absorb and move past. That afternoon hadn't gone cleanly for her. A staffing issue had forced her to stay longer than planned, and she left already frustrated, replaying a disagreement with an employee who hadn't followed her instructions. She'd already escalated before reaching the intersection. A block earlier, another driver tried to merge. Gina blocked them, then got out at a red light and argued in the middle of traffic, refusing to move until acknowledged. Horns finally pushed her back into her car, but she drove on still agitated, carrying it into the next block. The light ahead turned yellow as she approached. She had enough distance to stop. The signal had just changed, and the intersection was close enough that stopping was the obvious call. She accelerated instead. When you are already mad and not paying attention to the road, that is a whole different level of danger. By the time she entered the intersection, cross traffic had already begun moving on their green. A vehicle was crossing from her left. Rather than braking, she swerved hard to avoid it, an aggressive steering input that pushed her completely off her intended path and sent her vehicle into a utility pole at the corner of the intersection. The pole snapped on impact. Electrical lines came down across the roof and driver's side of the vehicle. The door frame on her side had crumpled inward from the collision, exposing the bare metal of the frame underneath. The car had come to rest on pavement that was still damp from the morning rain, which created a grounding path between the vehicle and the road surface beneath it. Gina pushed against the damaged driver's side door from the inside, attempting to force it open. The contact between her arm and the energized exposed metal at the door frame completed a circuit. Electrical arcing was confirmed at the contact points during the subsequent investigation. She collapsed inside the vehicle. Bystanders at the intersection called emergency services immediately after the crash. Responding crews identified the downed lines before approaching the vehicle and contacted the utility provider to cut power to the affected section. Once the scene was cleared and confirmed safe, responders reached Gina inside. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The official cause of death was electrocution. Burn marks at the contact points and the physical evidence at the scene confirmed electrical involvement. She was so determined to prove a point earlier that day, I half expected her to treat the red light like a suggestion. Turns out that's exactly what she did. Honestly, electrocution from a road incident felt about as unlikely as anything I'd covered. Then, Leslie's case reminded me you don't need a downed power line, just a traffic stop and 30 seconds of the wrong decision. It was June 2018, on a highway off-ramp in Southern California, the kind of exit that peels away from freeway speed and curves sharply before feeding into surface street traffic. Concrete barriers lining the outer edge of the bend, advisory speed posted clearly at the ramp entrance at 25 miles per hour. It was daytime, skies clear, visibility unobstructed in every direction. Leslie Cable was 36 years old. She worked in a client-facing role that required her to be convincing, and by most accounts, she was capable at it. She had been running late to a client meeting after leaving behind something she needed, doubling back through traffic and losing time. She had been observed driving erratically on the highway leading up to the exit. Irregular speed, unsignaled lane changes, the kind of behavior that warrants a stop. The officer activated lights and she pulled to the shoulder near the off-ramp entrance. The stop itself began without incident, but the moment the officer reached her window, the exchange changed tone immediately. She was argumentative from the first word, cutting across instructions before they were finished, raising her voice, refusing to produce her license when asked. The officer's dash cam captured all of it. A lot of people asked in the comments of my last video why I say it is so important to listen to the police during a stop. This case shows exactly why the officer gave clear orders, and when she said no, things just got worse. She accelerated away from the stop without warning. The officer stepped back from the vehicle to avoid being struck as she pulled out. The ramp entrance was directly ahead of her. The curve on that ramp is sharp, and the concrete barrier on the outer edge sits close. At 25 miles per hour, it presents no challenge. At the speed her vehicle reached by the time it entered the bend, approximately 70 miles per hour, it left no margin at all. She didn't brake going in. Her vehicle went straight where the ramp curved left and struck the concrete head-on. The front end compressed severely on contact. Airbags deployed. Her head was driven forward into the steering area with significant force. The windshield fractured outward from the energy of the impact. The officer radioed the crash the moment she accelerated away from the stop. Responding units arrived to find the vehicle against the barrier, non-operational, and Leslie unresponsive inside. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The official cause of death was head trauma. The dash cam footage captured the complete sequence from start to finish. Honestly, I don't get it. If you're already pulled over, the fastest way out is cooperation. Accelerating away is not the solution. No officer, no other driver, no intersection. The next one had none of that. Just a flooded road, a barricade, and a group of strangers standing on the bank waving her back, and she drove past every single one of them. It was May 2016 on a low-lying rural road in southern Louisiana. The region had been absorbing heavy rainfall for several days, and the road ahead, a two-lane crossing built over a drainage channel, had flooded completely. The water stretched well past both shoulders, murky and moving, carrying debris across the surface in a way that made the current visible even from a distance. Local crews had placed barricades across the lane before conditions worsened further. By the time Gina Giddens arrived at that crossing, other drivers had already read the situation, turned around, and found another route. Gina was 33, and that morning had already started behind schedule. A late call had pushed back her entire day, one delay stacking onto another. She'd rerouted twice already because of flooded streets, each detour adding time she felt she didn't have. By the time she reached this crossing, this wasn't just another obstacle. It was the third one in under an hour. She stopped at the barricade as bystanders approached, warning her to turn back. Instead of listening, she argued, then drove around the barrier and into the water without looking back. I actually remember a time when my own town flooded, and I turned back even though I thought I could make it. Seeing Gina argue with locals reminded me how tempting it is to think you know better. But that choice can be between life and death. The water reached her door level within seconds of entry. The current, which had been visible from the bank, immediately began pushing the vehicle sideways rather than letting it track straight across. She didn't reverse. The engine stalled somewhere in the middle of the crossing as water reached the intake, and from that point, nothing was in her control anymore. She tried the doors. The water pressure holding against the exterior panels kept them sealed shut. She tried the windows. The electrical system had gone with the engine. Water was entering through the floor seals and rising from the footwell upward inside the cabin. The vehicle continued drifting laterally off the road surface and into the deeper section of the channel beyond the crossing's edge, where the bottom dropped away beneath it. Bystanders at the road called emergency services as the vehicle drifted. The current carried it further downstream before it settled and submerged. Search and rescue crews arrived and worked the channel in the direction of the current. The vehicle was located submerged downstream from the crossing. Gina was found inside, still restrained by her seatbelt. The official cause of death was drowning. Witness statements confirmed she had been warned by multiple people before entering the water and had visibly dismissed those warnings. The barricades were documented as placed and intact prior to her arrival. She had driven around them deliberately. To me, the biggest thing isn't just that she chose to drive in, it's how she ignored the people who were trying to help her. That is the part I can't stop thinking about. The image I couldn't shake after Gina's story was people watching from the bank, completely powerless. And the next case gave me that same feeling all over again, except this time the danger wasn't water. It was one step backward. It was January 2017 on a multi-lane commercial road in Florida. The kind of stretch that cuts through the middle of a retail corridor, multiple lanes running in both directions, traffic moving at a consistent 40 to 45 miles per hour, parking lot entrances and turn lanes breaking up the curb on both sides. It was daytime, conditions clear, the road open and fully visible in both directions for a long distance ahead. Samantha Hensley was 39 years old. She worked in an office role where she was organized and focused on details. People who knew her said she kept close track of what she felt she deserved. She didn't let things go easily, whether they were big or small. She'd left work earlier than planned after a disagreement with a supervisor. Honestly, her attitude feels exhausting, like someone who turns every small issue into a battle she has to win, even when letting it go would make life easier for everyone, including herself. A minor sideswipe between her vehicle and another initiated the sequence. Low speed, adjacent lanes, the kind of contact that produces a crumpled mirror or a scrape along the door panel. Both vehicles remained fully drivable after the contact. The other driver immediately began moving toward the shoulder to get out of traffic. Samantha stopped where she was, in an active travel lane, and was out of her car before the other driver had finished pulling over. She approached the other driver but stepped into active lanes instead of the shoulder. Witnesses said she was immediately confrontational, focused on the argument, not her surroundings, while the other driver tried to move things toward the sidewalk. She followed deeper into the road. I've talked about road confrontations a lot on this channel, and one thing a viewer pointed out in the comments a while back has stayed with me. They said the problem isn't just the anger, it's that the anger takes over the part of your brain that's supposed to be doing basic safety math. Where am I standing? What is moving near me? That comment makes more sense to me now than it did then. She took a step backward at some point during the argument, back toward the active travel lane behind her, without turning to check what was coming. Traffic in that lane had not stopped. A vehicle traveling at approximately 45 miles per hour entered the space she had stepped into. The driver applied brakes, but the distance between them when she entered the lane was too short for the vehicle to stop in time. The impact was at torso height. Her body was carried forward onto the hood before being thrown ahead of the vehicle onto the road surface. The secondary impact between her head and the pavement caused the fatal injury. Multiple witnesses called emergency services immediately. Responders arrived to find Samantha on the road surface. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The official cause of death was blunt force head trauma sustained from the ground impact. Witness accounts confirmed she had stepped backward into the active travel lane while engaged in the confrontation and had not looked toward oncoming traffic before doing so. Investigators confirmed the striking driver had attempted to brake and that no fault was assigned to them. The report noted that neither vehicle had been repositioned to a safe location prior to the confrontation beginning. Most of us like to think we would make the smart choice, but moments like this are a scary reminder of how easily pure anger can override our common sense before we even realize what we've done. Every story today had some kind of external trigger. Another driver, an officer, a flooded road. Wendy's didn't, and I think that's actually what makes it the hardest one, because her only opponent was the passenger sitting right next to her trying to help. It was September 2015 on an industrial corridor road in northern New Jersey, the kind of route that moves alongside freight yards and warehouse lots. Wide lanes, long flat stretches, heavy vehicle traffic mixed in with regular cars. It was evening, the light already dropping from the sky, the road thinning out from its daytime volume into something quieter and more spaced out. Wendy Clack was 44, and that day hadn't started as a simple drive. She had been working against a delay earlier in the schedule, a late shipment, a timing issue that pushed everything back. By the time she got on the road, she wasn't just driving to get somewhere. She was trying to make up lost time. The longer the drive stretched, the more it became about finishing the task rather than evaluating her condition. She treated the delay like an offense against her, not a setback. The kind of person who doubled down instead of adjusting, who saw concern as interference, and who shut people down quickly when they questioned her decisions, especially if she didn't see them as having any authority over her. She had been behind the wheel for over 10 hours by the time this stretch became relevant. Her passenger had been with her for most of it and had been watching the signs accumulate. Lane corrections that came a half-second late. Long silences that felt less like composure and more like absence. The kind of stillness that isn't restful. They offered to take over the wheel. Wendy declined. A rest stop came up on the signs ahead, and the passenger pointed it out. She passed it without slowing. When a second one appeared and the passenger brought it up again, she told them she was fine and that they were close enough to keep going. The passenger, by their own account given to investigators later, didn't push a third time, not because they were convinced, but because they had run out of ways to reach her. I've done long drives myself, and I know the moment when your eyelids start to feel heavy. That's the cue for you to stop. Ignoring it is gambling with your life, especially on the road. She began drifting within her lane. Gradual, slow movements that corrected themselves too late. The passenger noticed and stayed quiet. At around 50 miles per hour, the vehicle crossed the right shoulder line and moved onto the gravel edge. She didn't correct in time. The car struck a roadside fence first, which redirected it before it made contact with the side of a parked tanker trailer at the edge of an adjacent industrial lot. The front end of her vehicle compressed heavily on impact, trapping her in the driver's seat. Her lower body was pinned beneath the collapsed dashboard. The collision damaged a connection point on the tanker. A chemical compound used in industrial processing began venting as vapor from the impact point. The crash had broken out the driver's side windows entirely, leaving the cabin open to the surrounding air. Wendy remained trapped inside the vehicle for several minutes, while the vapor continued releasing nearby. The passenger was able to get out through the passenger door and move away from the area. Emergency services were called immediately. Responding crews identified the vapor release before approaching the vehicle and pulled back to wait for hazmat support. A hazmat team secured the scene before extraction could safely begin. Wendy was removed from the vehicle after the area was stabilized. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The official cause of death was a combination of blunt force trauma and inhalation exposure sustained during the time she remained trapped. Investigators confirmed fatigue as the primary contributing factor, supported by the absence of any braking evidence in the approach to the drift and the passenger's full account of the hours leading up to it. I get that the instinct to finish what you start, but on the road, finishing sometimes means stopping.